creepy greetings, and welcome to Creepy Coffees, where the haunt is hot, the brew is bold.
Sip the strange, taste the terrifying.
Let's pour into the paranormal. This is Creepy Coffees. Welcome to Creepy Coffees, where the brew is bold and the stories are bone-chilling.
We're your hosts, Eddie and Dawn Ravenscar, and tonight we're unlocking the doors to one of the darkest chapters in American history, the twisted tale of H.H. Holmes and his infamous murder castle. But first, let's share our percolated pick of the week. Tonight's brew is the Midnight Murder Blend from Black & Roast Company, a bold, dark roast with notes of smoke, molasses, and something sinister. We're drinking it out of vintage Victorian teacups to match tonight's villain's favorite era. If you're sipping along, tag us in Creepy Coffees and let us know your thoughts or screams.
Welcome back. Everyone caffeinated or on their way to a brewed bliss. So, who was H.H. Holmes? Born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861 in New Hampshire, Holmes was brilliant and dangerously charismatic. He studied medicine, perfected the art of deceit, and lived under many aliases, but one would make him infamous: H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes was known as an American con artist and an active serial killer between 1891 and 1894. By the time of his execution in 1896, Holmes had engaged in a lengthy criminal career that included insurance fraud, forgery, swindling, 3 or 4 bigamous marriages, horse theft, and murder.
Known by many nicknames as the Beast of Chicago, the Devil in the White City, or the Torture Doctor, his most notorious crimes took place in Chicago around the time of the World's Expo 1893, and that's the time period we are focusing on this time around. Holmes moved to Chicago in August 1886, which is when he began using the pseudonym H.H. Holmes. Soon after his arrival, he came across a drugstore at the northwest corner of South Wallace Avenue and West 63rd Street in the Englewood section of Chicago. The drugstore's owner, Elizabeth Holton, gave Holmes a job. He proved to be a hardworking employee and eventually bought the store.
Eventually, Holmes purchased an empty lot across the street where he began construction in 1887 for a 2-story, mixed-use building with apartments on the 2nd floor and retail spaces, including a new drugstore on the 1st. When Holmes refused to pay the architects or the steel company for the build and their work, Etna Iron and Steel, they took him to court in 1888, but that's an entirely separate story in itself. In 1892, he added a 3rd floor, telling his now investors and suppliers he intended to use it as a hotel during the upcoming World's Expo. Multiple accounts report that Holmes built the hotel to lure tourists visiting the exposition in order to kill them and sell eventually their skeletons to nearby medical schools. Although he did have a history of selling stolen cadavers to medical schools, Holmes had acquired these wares through grave robbing rather than murder. Oddly enough, there is no evidence that Holmes ever murdered exposition goers on the premises.
The press has labeled the building as Holmes's murder castle, claiming the structure contains secret torture chambers, trapdoors, gas chambers, and a basement crematorium. None of these sensationalized claims were ever proven true. Other accounts stated that the hotel was made up of over 100 rooms and laid out like a maze, with doors opening into brick walls, windowless rooms, and dead-end staircases. In reality, the 3rd floor hotel was moderately sized, largely unremarkable and uncompleted due to Holmes's ongoing disputes with the builders. It did, however, contain some hidden rooms, but they were used for hiding furniture Holmes bought on credit and never intended to pay for. Later in his confession, Holmes stated that his usual method of killing was to suffocate his victims using various means, including an overdose of chloroform, overexposure to lighting gas fumes, and trapping them in an airless vault. Holmes also claimed to have used starvation to just watch and see the suffering and effects on the victims. He also admitted to and stated to have burnt victims alive in his castle.
Holmes's hotel was gutted by a fire started by an unknown arsonist shortly after his arrest. Kind of odd when you think about it. a place where victims were burned alive, and out of all the places for an arsonist to choose, they chose that one. Shortly thereafter, while Holmes was in custody, the city rebuilt the building and began to use it as a post office until 1938. Besides his infamous murder castle, Holmes also owned a one-story factory which he claimed was to be used for glass bending. It is unclear if the factory furnace was ever used for this purpose. It has been speculated over and over again that the furnace may have been used to destroy incriminating evidence of Holmes's crimes, but there has never been a definitive answer. A newspaper account of Holmes's confession shows hand-drawn illustrations of the judge at his trial and 10 of his suspected victims. Holmes's mistress, 31-year-old Julia Smythe, was the wife of Dr. Lawrence Connor, who had moved into his building and began working at his pharmacy's jewelry counter. Shortly after Connor found out about Smythe's affair with Holmes, he quit his job and moved away, leaving Smythe and their 5-year-old daughter Pearl Connor behind. Smythe gained custody of Pearl and remained at the hotel. She continued her relationship with Holmes for a short period of time after. However, Julia and Pearl both disappeared on Christmas Eve of 1891. Holmes initially claimed that Julia had left unexpectedly to visit her dying sister, but then changed his story and said that she had fled to her former husband. Ultimately, Holmes later claimed that Julia had actually died during an abortion. Despite his medical background, Holmes was unlikely to be experienced in carrying out abortions, and mortality from such a procedure was high at that time. Holmes then claimed to have poisoned Pearl, most likely to hide the circumstances of her mother's death. Later during the trial, a partial skeleton, possibly of a child around Pearl's age, was found when excavating Holmes's cellar. Pearl's father was a key witness at Holmes's trial in Chicago, stating and confirming that his ex-wife and daughter were not with him.
23-year-old Emmeline Segrand, who began working in Holmes's building in May 1892 and worked for him for 6 months. Holmes reportedly hired Segrand as a secretary due to her connection to a doctor who peddled a vaccine that allegedly cured alcoholism. Those who saw Segrand in the weeks before her disappearance noted that she appeared to have lost interest in Holmes and their relationship. Segrand was last seen in December 1892. Her parents were informed that she had left to marry a man named Robert Phelps. Authorities hypothesized that she had gotten pregnant by Holmes, possibly being a victim of another failed abortion that Holmes tried to cover up. Eventually, her empty luggage trunk was sent back to her mother, Anderson, Indiana. Eventually, her skeleton was found by police at the home of a Chicago physician, with the help of M.G. Chappell, who admitted having articulated 3 skeletons for H.H. Holmes. But wait, there's more. In early 1893, a 24-year-old one-time actress named Wilhelmina Minnie Williams moved to Chicago. Holmes claimed to have met her in an employment office, though it is believed that he had actually met her in Boston several years earlier, while he was then going by the alias Harry Gordon. Holmes offered her a job at the hotel as his personal stenographer, and she accepted. Holmes persuaded Williams to transfer the deed to her property in Fort Worth, Texas, to a man named Alexander Bond, which was an alias of Holmes. In April 1893, Williams transferred the deed, with Holmes serving as the notary. Holmes later signed the deed over to Peitzel, giving him the alias Benton T. Lyman. In the following month, Holmes and Williams, presenting themselves as husband and wife, rented an apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Park. Minnie's younger sister, 18-year-old Anna Nanny Williams, came to visit, and on July 5, 1893, she wrote to her aunt that she planned to accompany Brother Harry to Europe. In it, she signed off with the message, "Brother Harry Holmes says you need never trouble any more about me financially or otherwise. He and sister will see to me. I hope our hard days are over." Afterward, neither Minnie nor Nanny were ever seen alive, and Holmes would subsequently use Minnie's name in future scams. And the list went on till finally. Holmes's murder spree finally ended when he was arrested in Boston on November 17, 1894. He was being tracked there from Philadelphia by the private Pinkerton National Detective Agency. He was eventually held on an outstanding warrant for horse theft in Texas, They used this because the authorities had become more suspicious at this point, and Holmes appeared poised to flee the country in the company of his unsuspecting third wife. In July 1895, following the discovery of two bodies, Alice and Nellie, Chicago police and reporters began investigating Holmes's building in Englewood. By now, it is already locally referred to as the Castle. Though many sensational claims were made, no evidence was found which could have convicted Holmes in Chicago, since there was only very circumstantial physical evidence of the Castle victims, a piece of human bone, possibly from Julia, Connor, remains of a child, possibly Pearl Connor, a burned gold watch chain, and burned dress buttons, apparently belonging to Minnie Williams, and a tuft of human female hair found in a chimney flue. Thus, Holmes would be tried for the murder of another victim, Pitezel, in Philadelphia, which had the clearest case for murder. In October 1895, Holmes was put on trial for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel and was found guilty and sentenced to death. By then, it was evident Holmes had also murdered the three missing Pitezel children. Following his conviction, Holmes confessed to 27 murders in Chicago, Indianapolis, and Toronto, and 6 attempted murders. Holmes was paid $7,500 by the Hearst newspapers in exchange for his confession. While writing his confessions in prison, Holmes mentioned how drastically his facial appearance had changed since his imprisonment.
On May 7, 1896, Holmes was hanged at Moyamensing Prison for the murder of Pitezel. Until the moment of his death, Holmes remained calm and amiable, showing very few signs of fear, anxiety, or depression. Despite this, he asked for his coffin to be contained in concrete and buried 10 feet deep. His reason was logical, because he was concerned grave robbers would steal his body and use it for dissection. During the hanging, Holmes's neck did not break. He instead strangled to death slowly, twitching for over 15 minutes before being pronounced dead. Some say just or he deserved to feel the pain that he inflicted on others. Upon his execution, Holmes's body was interred in an unmarked grave at Holy Cross Cemetery, a Catholic cemetery in the Philadelphia western suburb of Yeadon, Pennsylvania. To put all things to rest, on New Year's Eve 1909, a gentleman named Hedgepeth, who was a key witness in the arrest and trial of H. Holmes, who had also been pardoned for informing on Holmes, was shot and killed by police officer Edward Jabrick during a holdup at a Chicago bar. And finally, on March 7, 1914, the Chicago Tribune reported that, with the death of Patrick Quinlan, the former caretaker of the castle, the mysteries of Holmes's castle would remain unexplained. It's documented that Quinlan had committed suicide by taking strychnine. His body was found in his bedroom with a note that read, "I couldn't sleep." Quinlan's surviving relatives claimed that he had been haunted by his past doings for several months and was suffering from hallucinations. Kind of makes you wonder.
The castle itself was damaged by a fire in August 1895. 2 men were seen entering the back of the building at 9 p.m. About half an hour later, they were seen exiting the building and rapidly running away. Following several explosions, the castle went up in flames. Afterwards, investigators found a half-empty gas can underneath the back steps of the building. The building survived the fire and remained in use until it was torn down in 1938. The site is currently occupied by the Englewood branch of the United States Postal Service, and even though several groups have tried to get permission to dig and take samples from the ground to test, the government and United States Post Office still refuses, stating it would cause an interruption in service.
In 2017, during allegations from some and the request of the grandson of H. Holmes, it was believed that Holmes escaped execution. With all the questions hovering around the truth, Holmes's body was exhumed for testing, led by Janet Monge of the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. Due to his coffin being contained in concrete, his body was found to not have decomposed normally. His clothes were almost perfectly preserved, and his mustache was found to be intact. The body was positively identified by his dental records and teeth. It was confirmed that the body exhumed was indeed that of Holmes. He was then reburied. Thanks for joining us at Creepy Coffees. I'm your ghost host, Eddie Ravenscar, along with our Midnight Barista Don Ravenscar. Please don't forget to rate, review, and follow. Keep up with everything Creepy Coffees at creepycoffees.com and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Creepy Coffees.
And don't forget to keep listening for our updates. Check out our What's Going On page on our website and come say hello. In the next few months, we will be in Milwaukee, Portland, Seattle, The Rock, Alcatraz, and even up to Alaska, plus our ghost hunt trip to Ireland in August and France in December. It's going to be crazy, and we're both so excited. Until next time, stay scared, stay caffeinated, and as always, be good to each other and stay creepy.